Hi Kodiaks, it's Miss Coiner here again. Today I'm going to read a poem about toucans, and then I have a cool little video from when we were in Costa Rica a couple years ago. All right, Toucan Tour Guide. I was touring Peru in a silver canoe, and my guide was a toucan named Zeke, a talkative fellow with splashes of yellow and green on his eye-catching beak. The river was cold, the sunlight was gold. We were feeling as free as we could be when something I said made Zeke turn his head, and the tip of his beak hit a tree. So he stopped for the night at a vine-covered site, and Zeke made a fire by our tent. I tried not to peek at his curious beak, but to tell you the truth, it was bent. Can you see his little beak there? Poor little toucan. All right, Kodiaks, have a good week.
Happy Wednesday, Kodiaks. So I'm back with the rest of this book, Separate is Never Equal. Just as a recap, in the beginning, Sylvia and she was at school and she was feeling kind of picked on a little bit because of the color of her skin, but then her mom was telling her the story, reminding her of the story of how hard they fought for her to get to go to this school. Back during this time, this was in the 1940s, in Southern California, schools were segregated. So any students who were Mexican had to go to a different school than the students who were white. And what we learned in the last book, or last week's story session, I guess the first half of the story, is that the quality of the schools was quite different. The Mexican school was right by a pasture. There were lots of flies. It was dirty. The teachers didn't have very high expectations for the students. It was definitely not equal. And they were starting to fight for desegregation. So I'm going to read the rest of the story today, and then I'll have a link for some choices of books that you can vote for next week's Stories with Sheffels. So here we go. I'm going to kind of do this a different way so you can see the pages better, and hopefully it works out well. So enjoy the second part of Separate is Never Equal, Sylvia Mendez and her family's fight for desegregation. With the help of Mr. Marcus, Mr. Mendez found and talked with other families who were dealing with segregation. One of them was the Estrada family. Mr. Estrada had fought in World War II. He had risked his life next to Americans of all races and backgrounds. But when he returned to America from the war, he found out that his children were not allowed to attend school with white children. Es una injusticia, said Mr. Mendez. It's an injustice. The Estrada family joined the Mendez case, and so did 3 more families. The families were from different school districts in Orange County: Westminster, where Sylvia lived, Garden Grove, El Medina, and Santa Ana. Mr. Marcus wanted to show that the segregation of students affected not only Sylvia and her brothers, but more than 5,000 children in public school systems all over Orange County. On March 2nd, 1945, Mr. Marcus went to the courthouse and filed the lawsuit. The trial was held at a courthouse in Los Angeles. Sylvia and her family dressed in their best clothes and sat in the courtroom to listen. The hearing lasted 5 days. Each day, Mr. Marcus called to the stand parents from the different districts in Orange County and the superintendents from each district, too. On the first day, Mr. Kent, the superintendent of the Garden Grove School District, was questioned. He said that he sent children to the Mexican school to help them improve their English. That is a lie, thought Sylvia. Her English was as good as the English of many of the children at the Westminster school. Do you give the children any tests? Asked Mr. Marcus. Mr. Kent claimed he did. We do so by talking to them. That is another lie. Sylvia wanted to yell. No one had questioned her. They rejected her from the Westminster school without asking her a thing. one thing that's important to remember is that this part of California was actually part of Mexico before it was part of the United States. So there are a lot of students who are kids and people who are of Mexican heritage and may have darker skin, but they are just as American as any of the settlers who came there and speak English. And this superintendent is just using it as an excuse, the language part. For what other reasons do you send children to the Mexican school? Asked Mr. Marcus. Sylvia and her family braced themselves to hear what Mr. Kent would say next. For their social behavior, they need to learn cleanliness of mind, manner, and dress. They are not learning that at home. They have problems with lice, impetigo, and tuberculosis. They have generally dirty hands, face, neck, and ears. The Mendez family and the others in the room stared at Mr. Kent in disbelief. What he was saying was not true, and it was degrading. How many of the 292 children at the Mexican school are inferior to whites in personal hygiene? At least 75%. And in their scholastic ability, 75%. So Mr. Kent, the superintendent, is saying that the Mexican children need to go to a different school because they don't speak English well enough and because they are dirty. This was very, very, very degrading is what she said in the story. And that means it's like just a very awful way to talk about people and treat people, and it's not true. In what other respects are they inferior? In their economic outlook, in their clothing, and in their ability to take part in the activities of school. Do you believe that white students are superior to Mexicans in the respects that you have mentioned? Yes. And is that one of the reasons they are being segregated? Yes. Time and time again, Mr. Mendez had asked, why can't my children attend the Westminster School? Now he had his answer. It's because the people believe whites are superior, which is kind of shocking to hear now, but it was a pretty common thing in the time, unfortunately. On the second day, Mr. Marcus called to the stand a 14-year-old student from the Mexican school in El Medina. Her name was Carol Torres. She spoke perfect English. It was clear she had not been sent to the Mexican school because she had problems speaking the language, as the defense lawyers claimed. Mr. and Mr. Mendez were questioned on the third day and fourth day, and so was Mr. Harris, the superintendent of the Westminster School. Sylvia was not called to the stand, but she was ready to testify if they asked her to. She tried looking her best every morning, and she practiced what she would answer. On the fifth day of the hearing, Mr. Marcus called to the stand 2 education specialists to explain why it was bad to segregate children into different schools. Segregation tends to give an aura of inferiority. In order to have the people of the United States understand one another, it is necessary for them to live together, and the public school is one mechanism where all children of all people should go, said one of them. The judge nodded his head. He seemed to agree with this. Judge Paul McCormick took almost a year to give his decision. But when he did, he ruled in favor of the Mendez family. In his ruling, he said that public education must be open to all children by unified school association regardless of lineage. This meant that everyone must be allowed to attend school, no matter what his or her race or background. The Mendez victory made newspaper headlines. Sylvia's family was ecstatic, but they did not have much time to celebrate because the school board appealed the decision. That is, they asked for judges with more authority to review the case and change the result. The case was reviewed by the Court of Appeals in San Francisco. The headline says, "Ruling gives Mexican children equal rights." Here's San Francisco. You can tell by the iconic Golden Gate Bridge. During the appeal, the Mendez family received support from the League of United Latin American Citizens, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, you may have heard that referred to as the NAACP, the Japanese American Citizens League, the American Jewish Congress, and other organizations. These groups sent letters with information relevant to the case and asked the judge to rule in favor of the Mendez family. Sylvia was amazed that people of different backgrounds and from different parts of the country who had never met her family were getting involved in the case and trying to help them. But her mother said, "Cuando la causa es justa, los demás te siguen." When you fight for justice, others will follow. On April 15th, 1947, the judges in the Court of Appeals in San Francisco ruled in favor of the Mendez family again. That June, Governor Earl Warren signed the law that said that all children in California were allowed to go to school together, regardless of race, ethnicity, or language. "So remember," said Sylvia's mother, "we fought to make sure you could attend a good school and have equal opportunities." So remember in the beginning of the story, it flashed back to the memory of her fight for equality. Now the flashback is over and we're back in real time. Sylvia thought long and hard about what her mother said. The next day she returned to the Westminster school. This time she did not listen to any whispers. She ignored the children who pointed at her and called her names. Instead, she held her head high. Her parents had fought not only for her and her brothers, but for all their classmates. Looking around, she saw other children were smiling at her. By the end of the day, she had made a friend, and by the end of the school year, she had made many friends of different backgrounds. She knew that her family had fought for that. That's the end of the story, but we have an author's note with a real picture of Sylvia Mendez. This is her as a young girl in 1947. This is her in 2011. She earned a Presidential Medal of Freedom. These are her parents, and then it shows the two schools that were there back then, Westminster School and Hoover Elementary. And then there's a glossary and a timeline and all sorts of interesting things to look at. This is a true story, right? It's based on a true story. They did some fictionalizing just to make it kind of fun for kids to read. Really cool artwork. Looks kind of like indigenous Mexican artwork with the way that their faces and ears and like curls are, the way that the artist has kind of curled some of the features, but very cool. Very sad that it had to happen. I really love that public education is for everyone and that has been something that has been fought for. So if we were going to be doing our perseverance story, the theme of this would be don't let fear stop you, because they were kind of afraid at first, the different people who were trying to sign the petition of what it might mean for their jobs. Notice that in this story it started with one family not getting to go to the school that they should be able to go to, and it turned a little bit bigger for the county, Orange County, and a little bit bigger, and it got to the whole state. And then I wish I could remember my totally historic facts, but sometime in the 50s, late 56, maybe 63, nationwide segregation was outlawed in schools. So it takes time, but even small moments can build up to something really big and meaningful. So that's this week's story. Separate is Never Equal. It was a two-parter. Next week, we can choose between... Hold on, I didn't have them out and ready. We're going to do, I think we're going to do some shorter ones this time. So you may choose between Everyone Can Learn to Ride a Bicycle and The OK Book. So option 1, option 2. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.